The transport ship rumbled as it entered the atmosphere of Theta 9. Inside the cargo bay, 100 cadets from across the galaxy stood in neat rows, each wearing their species' standard military uniform. Jiho Kim checked his supply pack for the third time. Emergency beacon, survival knife, water tablets, and a solar blanket. That was all anyone got. "Attention all cadets," the ship's computer announced in a flat mechanical voice. "You will be dropped in separate zones across the planet's surface. Your mission is simple: survive for 30 days. If you cannot continue, activate your emergency beacon. A rescue team will extract you within 6 hours. Good luck." Jiho looked around at the other cadets. To his left stood Velthar, a Vrexian whose insect-like body gleamed under the harsh lights. The creature's multiple eyes scanned the room with confidence. Velthar had been bragging for weeks about how his species evolved to survive in the harshest conditions. On his right, a massive Thornton named Gruul shifted his weight. The bear-like alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, covered in thick brown fur. Gruul had won every combat exercise in training. His strength was legendary. Near the back, an Aquelan named Sierra looked nervous. Her blue-green skin already seemed dry under the ship's air system. Aquelans needed moisture constantly. Jiho wondered how she would manage on Theta 9. The ship's bay doors opened with a hiss. Hot air rushed in, carrying the smell of dust and strange vegetation. One by one, the cadets jumped from the ship, their drop pods deploying automatically. Jiho watched the ground rush up to meet him as his pod descended. His pod landed with a heavy thud in a valley. Rocky hills surrounded him on 3 sides, and a river cut through the landscape about 200 meters away. Jiho climbed out and immediately felt the heat hit him like a wall. The twin suns of Theta 9 blazed overhead. He checked his portable scanner. Temperature, 42 degrees Celsius. It would drop to near freezing at night. Most cadets would rush to find shelter first. That was standard survival training across all species. Find shelter, secure water, then search for food. Repeat daily until rescue. Jiho had different plans. He walked slowly toward the river, studying everything around him. Small purple plants grew in clusters near the water. Their leaves were thick and waxy. Jiho recognized the adaptation. These plants stored water. He carefully collected seeds from several plants, wrapping them in a piece of cloth torn from his uniform. The river water was clear and fast-moving. Good. Fast water meant it was probably clean, though he would still purify it. But more importantly, he could use the river's flow. Jiho's grandfather had been a farmer in Korea. His father, too. They had taught him that water flowing downhill could do work. It could move things. It could irrigate crops. Jiho spent the rest of the first day exploring his zone. He found more plant varieties. Some had edible-looking roots. Others produced small fruits. He tested each one carefully, using the old method his grandmother taught him. Rub it on skin first, wait. If no reaction, touch it to lips, wait. If no burning, taste a tiny amount, wait. Most plants here seemed safe enough. As the sun began to set, Jiho finally thought about shelter. But he didn't just look for a cave or a rocky overhang. He walked along the riverbank until he found a spot where the ground flattened out. The soil here was rich and dark. A small stream branched off from the main river. Perfect. He spent the last hours of daylight gathering rocks and mud. His training in engineering served him well. Jiho knew how to mix mud and grass to make simple bricks. He shaped a dozen bricks and left them to dry overnight. They wouldn't be strong yet, but they would harden in the intense sun tomorrow. For tonight, he built a simple lean-to using branches and his solar blanket. It wasn't comfortable, but it would work. Jiho ate one of his emergency ration bars and drank purified water. Then he pulled out a small notebook he always carried. By the light of Theta 9's 2 moons, he drew diagrams, plans for irrigation channels, designs for fish traps, sketches of which plants to cultivate first. Somewhere in the distance, a creature howled. Jiho hoped it wasn't close, but he didn't worry too much. His shelter was hidden in the brush near the river. The sound of water would mask his presence. Up in orbit, the monitoring station tracked all 100 cadets through satellite feeds. Commander Una Park, the human instructor, sat at her console watching multiple screens. She saw Velthar digging a burrow into the side of a hill. Efficient. Gruul had found a cave and was already setting traps for small animals. Smart. Then she looked at Jiho's feed. The young man was writing in a notebook by moonlight. Una smiled. She recognized what he was planning. but she said nothing. The other instructors didn't understand human thinking yet. They would learn. Commander Thex, a tall insectoid who led the Rexian instructors, clicked his mandibles in amusement. The human spends his first day collecting seeds? He should be securing food and shelter. He will signal for rescue within a week. Yuna didn't respond. She had seen this before. Humans had an unusual approach to survival. Most species thought about surviving today, then tomorrow, then the next day. Humans thought about next month, next year. They planned ahead in ways that seemed wasteful at first but paid off later. On the planet's surface, Jiho finished his notes and lay down to sleep. His body ached from the day's work, but his mind was satisfied. Day 1 was complete. He had shelter. He had water, and he had something most cadets wouldn't think to secure. Seeds. The morning would bring new challenges. He needed to start building for real. The mud bricks would be ready. He could start shaping his irrigation channels. The fish traps could be woven from river reeds. There was so much to do. But unlike the other 99 cadets, Jiho wasn't thinking about surviving 30 days. He was thinking about building something that could last much longer. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Don't just take from the land. Help it give. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Jiho closed his eyes and listened to the river flowing past his temporary shelter. The sound was peaceful, familiar. Back home in Korea, his family's farm had a stream running through it. He had spent countless hours by that water, learning how to read the land, how to work with nature instead of against it. The other cadets were probably scared right now, worried about the 29 days ahead, but Jiho felt calm. He knew exactly what to do. He had been preparing for this his entire life, even if he hadn't realized it until now. Day 1 was complete. 29 more to go. Day 2 began with Jiho inspecting his mud bricks. The intense heat had baked them hard overnight. They weren't perfect, but they would work. He spent the morning making more bricks, mixing river mud with dried grass for strength. His hands grew rough and covered in dirt, but he didn't mind. This was familiar work. By midday, he had enough bricks to start building. But Jiho didn't build a better shelter first. Instead, he began constructing small walls along the flat ground near the stream. The walls would hold water and direct it where he wanted. His grandfather had called these irrigation channels. They were ancient technology, thousands of years old on Earth. But they worked. In another zone, Velthar was hunting. The Phyrexian had caught 2 small lizard-like creatures on day 1. Today he found nothing. His zone had fewer animals than expected. Velthar clicked his mandibles in frustration. He would need to expand his hunting range tomorrow. That meant more energy spent walking in the heat. Gruul was having better luck. The big Thornton had caught a large rabbit-like animal near his cave. The meat would last him 3 or 4 days if he rationed it carefully. But the hunt had exhausted him. His thick fur wasn't made for this heat. Gruul spent most of day 2 resting in his cave, trying to conserve energy. Sira had already activated her beacon. By the end of day 2, her skin had dried out too much. The medics extracted her quickly. She wasn't the only one. 2 other Aquelans and a crystalline being from the desert zones also called for rescue. The heat was too much for them. Jiho didn't know about the other cadets. He was too focused on his work. By the end of day 2, he had a basic irrigation channel running from the stream to his flat ground. Water flowed gently through the channel, soaking into the soil. Perfect. Day 3 brought new tasks. Jiho used his survival knife to dig small holes in the irrigated ground. Into each hole, he carefully placed seeds from the purple plants he had collected. He also planted seeds from plants with edible roots. His grandmother had taught him which plants grew fastest. Look for the ones with many seeds. They reproduce quickly because they grow quickly. Commander Thex watched the satellite feed with confusion. What is the human doing? He wastes time and energy on plants that won't mature for weeks. This is illogical. Yuna Park sipped her coffee and smiled. He's investing in the future. It's very human, but he should be hunting, finding food. His ration bars will run out in 2 days. Watch, Yuna said simply. By day 4, Jiho had moved on to a new project. He spent hours by the river studying the fish. They were small silver creatures about the length of his hand. They gathered in shallow areas where the water slowed down. Jiho waded into the river and began pushing rocks around, creating a small pool that connected to the main river through a narrow opening. Then he wove a trap from river reeds. The technique was simple. His father had shown him when he was 7 years old. Weave the reeds in a cone shape with a narrow opening. Fish swim in easily but can't find their way out. Jiho placed 3 traps in the river. By evening, he had caught 2 fish. He cooked them over a small fire and ate well. 4 more cadets signaled for rescue on day 4. The monitoring station was getting busy. Medics shuttled back and forth extracting exhausted, hungry, and injured cadets. Most species were struggling more than expected. Theta 9 was harsher than the simulations had suggested. Day 5 saw Jiho expanding his farm. Tiny green sprouts pushed up through the soil where he had planted seeds. The irrigation was working perfectly. The plants had constant moisture. They would grow fast in this heat and sunlight. Jiho planted more seeds in a second plot. Crop rotation, his grandfather called it. Always have something growing, something ready to harvest, and something just planted. Velthar was growing desperate. His hunting zone was nearly empty of easy prey. He had eaten only a handful of insects and 1 small lizard in the past 2 days. His energy was fading. But Vrexian pride kept him from signaling. Not yet. He could last longer. Gruel had managed to catch another animal, but the effort nearly killed him. He collapsed in his cave afterward, his body overheating. His thick fur trapped heat like a blanket. At night it kept him warm. During the day it was torture. Gruel began to wonder if he could make it to day 30. By day 7, 15 cadets had been rescued. The attrition rate worried the instructors. Commander Thex insisted this was normal. Survival courses were supposed to be difficult. The weak would fail. The strong would endure. But Yuna noticed something interesting. Most of the failed cadets came from species that relied on physical strength or natural advantages. The successful ones were adapting, learning, changing their approach. And then there was Jiho, who seemed to be on a completely different course than everyone else. Day 7 brought Jiho's first harvest. The fast-growing tubers he had planted were ready. He dug up 3 of them, each about the size of his fist. When cooked in the coals of his fire, they tasted bland but filling. Jiho ate 1 tuber and replanted part of another. Always save seeds. Always plant more. His fish traps were producing well now. He caught between 2 and 4 fish daily. More than he needed. Jiho built a simple smoking rack over his fire. Smoked fish would last for days without spoiling. His grandmother had smoked fish in Korea. The technique was the same here. Day 8 marked a turning point. Jiho's shelter was now a solid structure. Mud brick walls, a thatched roof made from river reeds, a proper door frame. Inside, he had storage areas for food. Outside, his irrigation channels fed 2 growing plots of vegetables. His fish traps worked automatically. He barely had to think about food anymore. That afternoon, Jiho noticed movement near his camp. Small bird-like creatures with 4 wings were investigating his farm. They pecked at insects in the soil. Jiho watched them carefully. They didn't touch his plants. They only ate bugs. Useful. He began leaving small scraps of food near his shelter. The birds returned the next day, and the day after. By day 10, they were comfortable around him. Jiho had seen chickens behave the same way on his family farm. These creatures could be tamed. Day 9 brought more rescues. Velthar finally admitted defeat. Starving and weak, he activated his beacon. The Vrexian had lost nearly a third of his body weight. The medics rushed him to the station for treatment. Commander Thex was silent as his best student was extracted. Gruel was on the edge of collapse. He had caught nothing in 3 days. His body was shutting down from heat exhaustion. But stubborn pride kept him going. Just a little longer. Surely he could outlast the others. 40 cadets had signaled by day 10. More than a third of the class was gone. The monitoring station buzzed with activity. Instructors debated whether to end the course early. The failure rate was too high. Perhaps Theta 9 is too harsh, suggested a reptilian instructor. We should consider relocating the course. No, Commander Thex said firmly. This is the correct difficulty. Those who fail were not ready. Those who remain are proving their worth. Yuna pulled up Jiho's feed on the main screen. The young human was currently adding composting to his farm. He had dug a pit and was filling it with plant waste and fish scraps. In a few weeks, it would become rich fertilizer. The other instructors stared at the screen in confusion. What is he doing now? Thex demanded. Planning for month 2, Yuna replied calmly. Month 2? The course ends in 20 days. I don't think he knows that matters, Yuna said with a slight smile. On Theta 9, Jiho sat by his fire. grilling fresh fish and roasting tubers. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. His crops were growing well. His fish traps were full. His shelter was comfortable. The bird creatures roosted nearby, already becoming used to his presence. 20 days to go, but Jiho wasn't counting. He was too busy planning his next project. Those reeds by the river could be used for better purposes. Maybe he could weave baskets for storage, or mats for the floor of his shelter. There was so much potential here. He finished his meal and walked through his small farm. The plants were already 6 inches tall. Another week and he would have a full harvest. Then he could expand even more. Maybe try planting some of the fruit-bearing plants he had found. For the first time since landing, Jiho felt completely at peace. This wasn't survival. This was living. Day 11 started like any other morning on Theta 9. Jiho woke with the first sun, checked his fish traps, and watered his crops. But today was special. Today he would harvest his first full crop of tubers. He had planted them 9 days ago and the fast-growing varieties were ready. He dug carefully, working his hands through the irrigated soil. Each plant yielded 3 or 4 tubers. By midday, Jiho had filled a woven basket with more than 20 tubers. More food than he could eat in a week. He replanted the best specimens immediately, keeping the cycle going. The monitoring station was quieter now. 42 cadets had been rescued. The instructors focused their attention on the remaining 58. Most were barely holding on. They had found routines that worked, but just barely. Hunt or forage each day. Find enough food for that day. Rest. Repeat gruel was one of the survivors. The big Thornton had finally adapted to the heat. He hunted only in the early morning and late evening, spending the hot midday hours resting in his cave. His catches were smaller now, but consistent. He was surviving, but his body was worn down. Every day was a struggle. A reptilian cadet named Kess was doing surprisingly well. She had found a cave system filled with edible fungus. The caves stayed cool and moist. As long as the fungus lasted, Kess could survive. But she knew her food source was limited. Eventually, the fungus would run out. Jiho didn't know about any of this. He was too focused on expanding his farm. Days 12 and 13 were spent clearing more ground and extending his irrigation channels. The work was hard but satisfying. Each day, his farm grew larger and more productive. The bird creatures had become fully tamed by day 13. They followed Jiho around his farm, eating insects and making soft chirping sounds. He built them a simple coop using woven reeds and mud. By evening, all 6 birds had moved into their new home. Jiho smiled. Fresh eggs would come soon if these creatures were anything like Earth birds. Day 14 brought an unexpected development. A supply drone crashed near Jiho's zone. These drones carried monitoring equipment, constantly circling the planet to track the cadets. This one had suffered a mechanical failure and spiraled down, landing about half a kilometer from his farm. Jiho heard the crash and went to investigate. The drone was badly damaged but salvageable. Most cadets would have immediately stripped it for the communication array, trying to boost their emergency beacon signal for a faster rescue. But Jiho saw different possibilities. He carefully removed metal panels, wiring, and a small solar cell. The solar cell was cracked but might still work. The metal would be useful for tools. The wiring could improve his fish traps or create better fasteners for his structures. He loaded everything into a basket and carried it back to his farm. Commander Thex watched this on the satellite feed with growing frustration. The human found a crashed drone. Standard protocol is to signal for early extraction after salvaging the beacon booster. Why doesn't he signal? Unipark was eating lunch at her console, barely glancing at the screen. Because he doesn't need rescue. Everyone needs rescue eventually. This course is designed to break down even the strongest cadets. Jiho isn't the strongest, Yuna said, but he doesn't need to be. Days 15 and 16 were productive. Jiho used metal from the drone to create better tools. A proper shovel for digging, a sharp blade for harvesting, hooks for better fish traps. He even managed to get the cracked solar cell working enough to provide a small amount of power. Not much, but enough to charge his portable scanner each day. His crops were exploding. The second planting was growing fast. The tubers from the first harvest had been processed. Some were stored in a cool underground pit he had dug. Others were replanted. Jiho had more food than he needed, so he began experimenting. Which preparation methods worked best? Could he dry these vegetables for long-term storage? By day 17, 55 cadets remained. More were signaling every day now. The constant hunger, the physical exhaustion, the mental strain of daily survival wore them down. Even the strongest were struggling. Gruel had grown thin despite his bulk. His hunting provided barely enough calories to sustain him. Kes was rationing her fungus carefully. She calculated that she could make it to day 30 if she ate less than she wanted. She was always hungry now, always tired, but she refused to quit. Reptilian pride drove her forward. Jiho's pride was different. It came from building something, creating something that worked. Day 17 brought the first eggs from his bird creatures. 4 small speckled eggs in the coop. Jiho cooked one immediately. It tasted similar to chicken eggs from Earth. Protein, fat, essential nutrients. He was now completely self-sufficient. That evening, Jiho sat outside his shelter and actually felt bored. His fish traps caught more than he could eat. His crops produced surplus food. His birds laid eggs. His irrigation system worked automatically. Water flowed where it needed to go. Everything ran smoothly, so he started a new project. Using river clay and techniques his grandmother had taught him, Jiho began making pottery. Simple bowls at first. The clay was easy to work with. He shaped several pieces and left them to dry. Tomorrow he would fire them in his cooking fire. Proper dishes would be nice. He was tired of eating from woven reed plates. Day 18 brought 60 rescue signals. Only 40 cadets remained. The monitoring station was running out of reasons to explain the high failure rate. This was supposed to be a survival course, not an elimination trial, yet most species simply couldn't adapt fast enough to Theta 9's harsh conditions. "We should end the course early," suggested a feline instructor. "The cadets who remain have proved themselves. Continuing serves no purpose." "No," Commander Thex insisted. "The course ends on day 30 as planned. Those who last will have earned their passage." Yuna said nothing, but she pulled up data on her console. Of the 40 remaining cadets, 38 were barely surviving. They had enough food for maybe another day or two. Most were exhausted, running on determination alone. Then there was Kes, who had resources for another 10 days if she rationed carefully. And then there was Jiho. Yuna looked at his resource levels and almost laughed. The young human had enough stored food for at least 60 days. His farm would continue producing indefinitely. His situation was more stable now than when he started. He wasn't surviving. He was thriving. Day 19 saw Jiho creating furniture. Using wood from dead trees along the river, he built a chair. An actual comfortable chair with a back and armrests. He also created a small table. That evening, he sat in his chair at his table, eating grilled fish from his new clay bowl, watching the sunset over his farm. The bird creatures roosted nearby. His crops swayed gently in the evening breeze. Water burbled through the irrigation channels. Smoke rose from his fire. It looked like a small homestead, not a survival camp. 5 more cadets signaled on day 19. Only 35 remained. Day 20 brought another milestone. Jiho's second crop was ready for harvest. He gathered the vegetables methodically, sorting them by quality. The best were saved for seeds. Good ones were stored for eating. Damaged ones went to the compost pit or were fed to the birds. He now had 3 separate fields in different stages of growth. One harvested and replanted. One growing. One ready to harvest soon. The cycle was self-sustaining. As long as he maintained the irrigation and composting, the farm would feed him indefinitely. That afternoon, Jiho did something unusual. He went fishing not with traps but with a line and hook made from drone wire. Not because he needed fish. His traps caught plenty, but because he wanted to. He sat by the river for 2 hours just fishing and thinking. It was peaceful, relaxing. He caught 3 large fish that afternoon, more than his traps usually caught. But the point wasn't the fish. The point was that Jiho had time to waste, time to relax, time to enjoy himself. In orbit, the monitoring station was in chaos. 65 cadets had now signaled for rescue. Only 35 remained, and most of those were on the edge of collapse. The instructors argued constantly about what this meant for their training, programs. "Perhaps we need to teach better survival skills," one suggested. "Or choose candidates more carefully," said another. "Or acknowledge that this planet is too hostile," offered a third, Yuna. Park listened to them all argue and said nothing. She knew the truth. The problem wasn't the planet or the training or the candidate selection. The problem was how different species defined survival. Most thought of it as endurance, lasting until rescue, holding on. Humans thought of survival differently. It wasn't about lasting. It was about building, creating, establishing, making a place not just livable but comfortable. Jiho wasn't trying to survive 30 days. He was building something that could last years. Day 20 ended with Jiho sitting in his chair, carving wooden utensils as a hobby. He had made spoons and forks. Now he was trying his hand at making a cup. The wood was soft and easy to carve. The work was meditative. 10 days remained. But Jiho had stopped counting. Day 21 arrived with storm clouds gathering over Theta 9. Jiho watched the dark sky and felt grateful for his solid shelter. Most cadets would be scrambling to reinforce their temporary camps, but his mud brick walls and thatched roof were built to last. He had learned from his grandfather that good construction meant thinking about the worst weather, not the average weather. The storm hit that afternoon. Rain poured down in sheets. Wind howled across the valley. Thunder cracked overhead. Jiho sat inside his shelter, warm and dry, working on his wood carving. Outside, his irrigation channels were overflowing, but he had built overflow paths for exactly this situation. The excess water would drain back to the river without damaging his crops. In other zones, the storm was devastating. 12 cadets signaled for rescue during the storm. Their shelters had collapsed, or flooding had destroyed their food supplies, or they simply couldn't endure the cold rain any longer. By the time the storm passed on day 22, only 23 cadets remained. Gruel was one of the casualties. The big Thornton had been holding on through sheer determination, but the storm broke him. Cold rain soaked through his fur. His cave flooded. His strength finally gave out. He activated his beacon with trembling paws, and the rescue team extracted him just before hypothermia set in. Velthar watched from the medical bay on the station. The Vrexian had recovered from his ordeal, but remained to observe the rest of the course. When he saw Gruel extracted, weak and shivering, Velthar clicked his mandibles sadly. The mighty Thornton had seemed invincible in training, but Theta 9 had proven stronger. How many remain? Velthar asked a medic. 23, the medic replied. Most will probably signal within the next few days. Only 1 or 2 might make it to day 30. What about the human? The one who was planting seeds? The medic pulled up Jiho's file on a screen.
Still there, still.
Farming, apparently. Velthar watched the satellite feed in silence. Jiho was outside his shelter, checking his crops after the storm. Some plants had been flattened by wind, but most were fine. The human moved calmly through his farm, propping up damaged plants and clearing debris. He didn't look stressed. He looked like he was doing routine maintenance. Day 23 brought clear skies and intense heat. The storm had left the ground muddy, but the twin suns quickly dried everything out. Jiho spent the morning harvesting his 3rd crop rotation. His storage pit was nearly full of food. He had smoked fish hanging in his shelter, dried vegetables in woven baskets, fresh eggs from his birds. He had more food than one person could eat in months. That afternoon, Jiho tried something new. He had noticed small fruits growing on certain plants near the river. They were sweet and slightly sour. He collected a basket of them and tried fermenting them using a technique his uncle had shown him years ago. Crush the fruit, add water, let natural yeasts do the work. In a few days, he might have a primitive wine or juice, not necessary for survival, but it would be interesting to try. 5 more cadets signaled on day 23. Their food had run out. Their energy was gone. They couldn't continue. 18 remained. Day 24 marked something significant. Kess, the reptilian cadet surviving on cave fungus, was down to her last supplies. She rationed carefully, eating only enough to maintain basic function. Her body was thin, her energy low, but she refused to quit. 8 more days. She could make it 8 more days. Jiho, meanwhile, was building additions to his farm. He constructed a 2nd coop for his birds, which had multiplied. He now had 9 birds and more eggs than he knew what to do with. He also created a smokehouse for preserving meat and fish more efficiently. The structure was simple but effective, using principles his grandmother had taught him. That evening, Jiho realized something. He was lonely. The work kept him busy, and the birds were pleasant company, but he missed talking to people. He missed conversation and jokes and shared meals. For the first time since landing on Theta 9, Jiho considered signaling for pickup, not because he couldn't survive, but because he wanted human contact. But he decided to wait. 6 more days until official extraction. He could wait 6 days. Day 25 brought disaster for many cadets. 8 more signaled for rescue. They had simply run out of resources. No food, no energy, no hope. Only 10 cadets remained across the entire planet. The monitoring station instructors were shocked. A 90% failure rate was unheard of. "This is a catastrophe," Commander Thex admitted. "We have failed as instructors." "No," Unipark said quietly. "The course revealed something important. We've been training cadets to endure, not to thrive. There's a difference." Thex turned his multiple eyes toward her. "What do you mean?" Una pulled up comparative data on the main screen. "Look at the cadets who lasted longest." Kes found a resource-rich location and managed it carefully. Smart. A few others found similar advantages. But look at Jiho. The screen showed Jiho's zone from orbit. Even from space, the farm was visible. Organized rows of crops, the irrigation system catching sunlight, structures arranged in a logical layout. It looked like a settlement, not a survival camp. "The human didn't just find resources," Una continued. "He created them. He turned a hostile environment into a productive one. That's not endurance. That's transformation." Day 26 was quiet. Jiho spent the day maintaining his farm and working on small projects. He fixed a weak spot in his shelter's roof. He improved one of his fish traps. He harvested more vegetables and properly stored them. Routine maintenance. The work of a settler, not a survivor. 2 more cadets signaled that day. Only 8 remained. Kes was still holding on, barely. She had 3 days of fungus left. 3 days until official extraction. She could make it. The others were scattered across Theta 9. A crystalline being had found a mineral-rich cave that provided sustenance through absorption. An amphibious creature had claimed a lake system. A small insectoid had gone into a semi-hibernation state to conserve energy. Each had found their own way to last a few more days. And then there was Jiho, who was currently experimenting with making soap from plant oils and ash. Not because he needed it urgently, but because he wanted to clean his dishes better. Day 27 brought the completion of Jiho's fermentation experiment. He carefully opened the clay jar where he had stored the crushed fruit. The smell was strong but not unpleasant. He tasted it cautiously. It was definitely alcoholic, though not particularly good, but it was drinkable. Jiho smiled. His grandmother would have been proud. That evening he sat in his chair at his table, drinking his homemade fruit wine and eating grilled fish. The sunset painted the sky purple and orange. His birds chirped softly in their coops. Water flowed through the irrigation channels with a peaceful bubbling sound. For a moment, Jiho forgot he was on an alien planet in a survival course. This felt like home. 3 more cadets signaled on day 27. One had injured themselves and couldn't continue. Another had exhausted their food source. The third simply gave up, mentally broken by the isolation and stress. Only 5 remained. Day 28 was Jiho's last full day before extraction. He spent it doing something unusual. He took a complete rest day. No farming, no building, no projects. He just relaxed. In the morning, he went fishing with his handmade pole. He caught several fish, but released most of them. He kept one for lunch. In the afternoon, he took a long walk along the river, exploring areas he hadn't visited before. He found new plants, interesting rocks, a small waterfall. He enjoyed the simple pleasure of walking without purpose. That evening, Jiho cooked his best meal yet. Fresh fish grilled with herbs he had been cultivating, roasted tubers seasoned with salt from evaporated river water, steamed vegetables from his garden, a cup of his fruit wine. He ate slowly, savoring each bite. After dinner, he sat outside his shelter and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, the monitoring station was tracking him. His instructors were watching. He wondered what they thought of his approach. Had he done the course correctly? Did it matter? 2 more cadets signaled on day 28. Only 3 remained. Kes was one of them, barely clinging to life on the last of her fungus. A crystalline being was still absorbing minerals, and Jiho was sitting outside his farm, completely comfortable, wondering if he should plant 1 more crop before leaving. In the monitoring station, all eyes were on Jiho's feed. Commander Thex had stopped criticizing. He simply watched in silence. Unipark had a satisfied smile on her face. The other instructors whispered among themselves, discussing what this meant for their training programs. Jiho finished his wine and went to bed. Tomorrow was day 29. The next day, extraction. He felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief to be going home, sadness to leave his farm, pride in what he had built, curiosity about what the instructors would say, but mostly he felt satisfied. He had come to Theta 9 with almost nothing. In 30 days he had built something real, something sustainable, something that could last long after he was gone. That seemed like success to him, regardless of what the official evaluation said. As he drifted off to sleep, Jiho's last thought was simple. His grandmother would have approved. Day 29 arrived with perfect weather. Clear skies, comfortable temperature, gentle breeze. Jiho woke early and went through his morning routine one last time. Check the fish traps, water the crops, collect eggs from the birds, feed the birds. It was peaceful work and he would miss it. Kes signaled her beacon at dawn. She had lasted as long as she could. The last of her fungus was gone. She had made it to day 29, which was impressive. The medical team extracted her quickly. She was severely malnourished but alive. She had proven her strength. The crystalline being lasted another few hours before signaling. It had absorbed all the available minerals in its zone and could sustain itself no longer. Now only Jiho remained, the last cadet on Theta 9. The monitoring station was busy preparing for extraction. Shuttles were being fueled. Medical teams stood ready. But there was also a strange energy in the air. All the instructors wanted to see Jiho's zone in person. The satellite feeds hadn't done it justice, they said. They needed to see this farm with their own eyes. Commander Thex authorized multiple shuttles. If the instructors wanted to observe, they could. This was, after all, an unprecedented situation. No cadet had ever done anything like this before. It deserved proper documentation. Jiho spent his last morning on Theta 9 walking through his farm. He checked each crop, noting which plants had grown best. He examined his irrigation system, proud of how well it worked. He counted his birds and made sure their coops were secure. Someone might come back here for research purposes. He wanted to leave everything in good condition. At midday, he heard the shuttles approaching. Multiple engines, which was unusual. Standard extraction was a single shuttle with a small crew. Jiho walked to the clearing near his shelter and waited. The first shuttle landed with a blast of dust and hot air. The doors opened and a large Thornton stepped out. Bruck was the extraction team leader, a veteran of many survival courses. He expected to find a desperate, exhausted human ready for immediate medical attention. Instead, he found Jiho standing calmly, barely dusty, looking healthy and well-fed. The human was actually wiping dirt from his hands with a cloth like he had just finished gardening. "Rescue?" Jiho asked, sounding slightly confused. "Oh, is it day 30 already? I've been meaning to ask, can I bring some of these seeds back? I've been selectively breeding them and they could work well in controlled environments." Bruck's jaw literally dropped open. Behind him, several team members stood frozen in shock. They had extracted 65 cadets over the past month. All of them had been exhausted, hungry, injured, or mentally broken. This human looked like he had been on vacation. The second shuttle landed and Commander Unipark stepped out, grinning widely. She had been waiting 30 days to see the reactions on everyone's faces. "It was worth it, Jiho Kim," she called out formally. "You have successfully completed the survival course. Was I supposed to do something else?" Jiho asked genuinely. The third shuttle landed and Commander Thex emerged along with several other species instructors. They looked around in stunned silence. From ground level, the farm was even more impressive than from orbit. The organized crop fields stretched out in neat rows. The irrigation channels reflected sunlight. Multiple structures stood in good repair. Birds chirped from their coops. The smell of growing vegetables filled the air. "This is impossible," Thex whispered. "No," Una said cheerfully. "This is human." Brock finally found his voice. "Cadet Kim, please show us your Realm facility." Jiho shrugged and began the tour. He walked them through his main shelter first. The mud brick structure was solid and well built. Inside, storage areas held dried vegetables, smoked fish, and various preserved foods. Clay dishes sat neatly on wooden shelves. A comfortable bed made from woven reeds and grass occupied one corner. Tools hung on the walls in organized rows. "I made most of this from salvaged materials and local resources," Jiho explained. The clay was from the riverbank. Wood from dead trees. The bricks are mud and grass mixture. Basic stuff. The instructors followed him outside to the crop fields. Jiho pointed out different plants in various growth stages. These tubers grow in about 9 days. These vegetables take 12 days. I've been doing crop rotation, so there's always something ready to harvest. The irrigation system pulls water from that stream, which branches off the main river. Gravity does most of the work. He showed them the fish traps. These catch 2 to 4 fish daily. More than I need, really. I've been smoking the extra. Then the bird coops. These creatures are similar to chickens from Earth. They eat insects and produce eggs. I started with 6 birds. Now I have 9, and they're still breeding. Finally, the compost pit. Organic waste breaks down here and becomes fertilizer. It's a closed-loop system. The farm feeds itself. Commander Thex examined a crop field closely. The plants were healthy and productive. The soil was rich. Everything was well maintained. How long could you have sustained this? He asked quietly. Jiho thought about it. Indefinitely, I think. As long as the river flows and the suns shine. Maybe longer if I keep improving the system. I was thinking about building a second irrigation channel and expanding to that flat area over there. He pointed to an undeveloped section of his zone. You were going to expand? Brock asked in disbelief. Well, I had time, Jiho said, and it seemed wasteful not to use that good soil. One of the instructors, a feline creature, spoke up nervously. Cadet Kim, were you aware this was a 30-day survival course? Yes, ma'am. And you understood the objective was to survive until extraction? Yes, ma'am. Then why did you build all this? You only needed to last 30 days. Jiho looked at her with genuine confusion. I don't understand the question. If I'm going to be somewhere for 30 days, why wouldn't I make it comfortable? My grandmother always said, don't just survive, live properly. So I built a proper farm. The instructors exchanged glances. This human had fundamentally misunderstood the assignment, yet somehow completed it better than anyone else ever had. Unipark stepped forward, still grinning. Jiho, do you know how many cadets signaled for rescue early? No, ma'am. I've been pretty focused on the farm. 99, Yuna said. Out of 100 cadets, 99 couldn't make it 30 days. You're the only one who didn't signal. Jiho processed this information. Oh, was it really that difficult? The planet has good resources if you look for them. Commander Thex made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cry of despair. Good resources, he repeated. This planet has been rated as extremely hostile. We chose it specifically because survival would be nearly impossible. Really? Jiho looked around at his farm. I mean, the heat is rough and water management was tricky at first. But once you get the irrigation working, everything else follows pretty naturally. Another instructor asked, Where did you learn these techniques? My family, Jiho said simply. We've been farmers for generations in Korea. My grandmother taught me about crop rotation. My grandfather showed me irrigation systems. My father taught me about composting. My mother showed me which plants were safe to eat. This is just basic farming. Everyone in my family knows this stuff. Everyone. Brock asked. Most humans really, Jiho said. We all learned basic agriculture growing up. It's part of our history. My people nearly starved several times before we figured out farming, so we teach it to all our children. Just in case, you know. The group stood in silence, processing this revelation. Humans taught their children advanced agricultural techniques as basic knowledge. What other species considered complex survival skills, humans considered elementary education. Velthar had been watching the extraction through a video feed from the medical bay. When he heard Jiho's explanation, he clicked his mandibles in understanding. The human hadn't been showing off. He hadn't been trying to prove anything. He had simply been applying childhood lessons. Skills so basic to humans they didn't even think of them as special. Back on Theta 9, Unipark made an official announcement. Jiho Kim, you have not only passed the survival course, you have set a new standard. Your performance will be studied and analyzed for years to come. Jiho looked embarrassed. I just built a farm, ma'am. It's not that impressive. To you, maybe, Yuna said. To the rest of the galaxy, it's revolutionary. The extraction team began packing up Jiho's belongings. He carefully collected seeds from his best plants, wrapping them in cloth. He said goodbye to his birds, hoping someone would care for them. He took one last look at his farm, feeling proud of what he had built. As they boarded the shuttle, Brock asked one final question. Cadet Kim, If we hadn't extracted you today, how long would you have stayed? Jiho thought carefully before answering. Honestly, I was getting a bit lonely. I probably would have signaled in another week or two, not because of the survival aspect, just because I missed talking to people. The shuttle lifted off, leaving the farm behind. From the air, it looked even more impressive. A green oasis in the harsh landscape of Theta 9. Proof that with the right knowledge and approach, even the most hostile environment could become a home. In the monitoring station, recordings of Jiho's farm were already being distributed to every military academy in the galaxy. New training programs were being designed.